Hello guys, welcome back to Mason African Motives, still on our revisions for mathematics grade 10. Remember, we had a condition whereby we are actually just focusing on a normal factorization, whereby you just have to consider the highest common factor of the given terms. But we also have a factorization that is important of quadratic trinomials. All right, remember, we considered different types of terms from a monomial, a binomial, and also a trinomial, whereby a trinomial is the one that you're going to have with three terms added together. So let us consider having ax squared plus bx plus c. This is the general expression that we are going to consider for a quadratic trinomial. All right, so considering this, I'm going to consider the first part, which is the easiest part that we are just going to consider direct, whereby this a here is equal to 1. So we're going to consider a factorization part of these quadratic trinomials, but on a consideration that our a in this case is equal to 1. All right, so of the ax squared plus b, which is the quadratic trinomial, but where our a is equal to 1 in this case. All right, so a can be equal to any number, guys. They can be 2, it can be 3. They can use negative any number that they can have, but we want to consider a special type where this is equal to 1. For an example, let us just say we have got an expression just like x squared plus 5x plus 6 like this. This is a quadratic trinomial that we are given, and you are asked there to factorize. Remember, just consider what we had previously, where the condition on the expansion of brackets, where we are given two brackets, x plus 1, x plus 3, and I expand these brackets and I have a format of this nature. So meaning to say, if we are to do the same thing to factorize, we are supposed to have two brackets at the end. All right, because here we are considering quadratic, the highest exponent there being 2. So we're going to have two brackets. So if this is a 1, consider to say I'm having this as a 1. So consider to say I'm supposed to have two brackets. So what you have to ask yourself is that, what am I going to do so that I'm going to have x squared at the end? All right, remember from your expansion of the brackets, I want you to get that in mind. From your expansion of your brackets, if you've got two brackets in this case, all right, you have got x plus 2, we have got x plus 7. You're considering x to multiply every term. So in order for you to have x squared, it means you multiplied x and x. So that means on your brackets, we are going to have this as x and this as x, only if this is a 1. Only if there is a 1, that is where you're going to write x and x direct is what I'm doing here. Then you move on to ask yourself here, this is the best, most important part now. You ask yourself on the constant, which is 6, you are going to need factors of the constant, which is factors of 6. That is two numbers that you multiply together to give you a 6. But not only to give you a 6, there must be factors of 6, yes, but after, if you add those two numbers, they must add up to 5. So these two factors of 6, they must add up to 5. They must add up to positive 5 in this case. So we need two numbers that we can multiply, and these two numbers, they give us a 6. But at the same time, these two numbers, if we add them, they must give us a 5. So it's a trial and error type of equation where you have to try your numbers, to multiply them together. There are so many numbers, guys, that you can use to multiply to get a 6. I want you to consider this condition. I have a 1 and a 6. If I multiply these two numbers, I get a 6. But if I add, because I said they must add up to 5, if I add 1 plus 6, it is going to be a 7, which is not a 5. So many say these two numbers are not going to work. Also, I could have worked with -1 and -6. But for the fact that this term here is a positive, I'm not supposed to be even thinking of having two negative numbers, because at the end, two negative numbers, they are going to be more negative. All right, so I'm not even supposed to think of that. All right, let's consider the two numbers 2 and 3, and also -2 and -3. But like I said, we are not supposed to be even focusing on the negative because the term that we have in the middle term, it's a positive. So there's no way that I'm going to consider these negative ones. All right, so let's consider this part and see. If we multiply these two numbers, 2 and 3, if we multiply these two numbers, truly we get a 6. These are factors of 6. If we add these two numbers, 2 plus 3, we get a 5. They add up to 5. So these are the two numbers that you're going to use. This one as a positive and this one as a positive. So you're simply going to write these numbers in your brackets, the one that you consider as the factors of the constant, but they add up to the number that is affecting x, which is the coefficient of x. So we said our numbers is going to be +2, and the other one is going to be +3. So that means we have done, we have factorized, we've got two brackets at the end, all right? So we've got two brackets of the binomial, all right? We've got a binomial here, we've got a binomial here from a trinomial expression that we're given to factorize, all right? So that is how we can just play around with your factorization in this case. All right, let us consider the same type of equation, but we've got a negative, so that we try by all means to play around with the signs that you might be given. Let's say, again, we are being asked to factorize completely or factorize fully, in this case, x squared minus 5x plus 6. So if you are to consider, we are still on the same scenario of our a being equal to 1. We are still working with a quadratic trinomial with our a being equal to 1. All right, so if you are to consider, we are having this part there that we are having of the coefficient of x squared. We are not given a number there. So that means the number that we have there is a positive 1. So like I said, once you have this condition, try by all means to simply factorize direct. X squared minus 5x plus 6 is going to give us two brackets. That's what we know. All right, we've got a quadratic there. So we're going to have two brackets at the end. And the coefficient of x squared is a 1. So that means we're multiplying x and another x to get this x squared. So that means here we are going to have x on this bracket, and we are also going to have x on the other bracket. Then, like I said, you have to consider now the constant, find its factors, but the factors of the constant must add up to the number that we have in the middle term, which is -5. So that means considering the factors of 6 that we talked about previously, we talked about the factors of 6. We are not going to consider the factors of 6 such as 6 and 1 because there it's a positive and a positive. And if I add a positive and a positive, the answer is going to be a positive. There's no way that our answer is going to be negative. So I have to focus on the factors of 6, but those ones that carry a negative. So from those ones that are positive, remember, we have got 6 and 1, also 3 and 2. Those are the ones that we have having a positive. Just change this and put a negative. Just put a negative, put a negative, put a negative, put a negative there. Remember that a negative times a negative, it gives us a positive. If this was a -6, it means one of the numbers has to be positive, another one has to be negative. But here we are working with a +6, so it means all of the numbers should be negative so that the product is going to be a positive. So now let's consider, because we know that these numbers, if we multiply them, they are going to give us a +6, which is true. But now, which of this part, when we add, we are going to obtain a -5. So there, if you are not in understanding of your directed numbers, just use your calculator like this, -6 plus -1 like this. This is going to give us a -7. It is not giving us -5. So you move on to the other one, -3 plus -2. So that's -3 plus -2 like this. And this is going to give us a -5. So that means the factors that you're going to consider is -3. I mean, the numbers that you're going to consider will be -3 and a -2. So these are the numbers that you're going to use as they are. -3 here, -2 here. So we have factorized our expression. Just by doing this, you have your expression in a factorized manner, or in its simplest form, in its factorized manner that we are given. So if you are to consider this, you are going to factor out, or you are going to consider a factorization of different types of expressions. And like I said, you can also have a condition whereby the coefficient of x squared is no longer a 1. But in this class, we are going to be focusing with the coefficient of x squared being a 1. All right, let us consider x squared. Another question, it can be x squared minus 7x plus 12. Let us just try something like that. All right. I'm going to change the question here. All right, so let us consider having x squared minus 7x plus 12 like that. All right, we just want to go through and see how these questions might be given as. So if you are to consider here, we have got a negative in the middle, all right, which is fine. So we have to consider, just like the previous question that we had, the coefficient of x squared, it's a positive. So I'm just going to have 2 brackets, x on this side, x on that other side. So now, considering factors of 12, there must be 2 numbers that I have to multiply, and these numbers should give me a positive 12. The same 2 numbers that I have multiplied to give me a positive 12 should or must add up to -7. So as you can see, adding up to a negative number, if you add them, they must give you a negative number. It means those numbers should be negative, all right? So you are going to consider to say, all right, just consider factors of 12 as positive. Don't worry about negative. We have got 12 and 1. These are factors of 12. We have got 6 and 2. We have got 4 and 3. So many factors, all right? So these are the factors that we have. But because the middle term that we have, it's a negative, it means we were adding 2 negative numbers in order for us to get a negative, all right? Remember, a -7, a -3, the number will be more negative. So it means we must have 2 negative numbers, because this one must be a product, which the product must be a positive. Also, you have to consider that. So 1, if it is negative, it does not give us the positive 12. So both numbers, they have to be negative, so that there we are having a positive at the end. So I'm going to just put a negative, a negative, a negative, a negative, a negative, and a negative there. So now I have to test these values. I have to add here and see if I get a -7. Add here and see if I get a -7. Add here and see if I get a -7. All right. So just like I showed you guys on the calculator, you are going to see that this one is going to give us -13. This one is going to give us -8. And this one is going to give us a -7, which is exactly what we want in this case. All right. So we are going to consider this -4 and -3. All right. If you consider on your calculator, -4 plus, because we have to add the terms. All right. So we're going to add -3. So that is going to be a -7. So like I said, the terms that you add to give you the term that is the coefficient of the middle term, which is -7, you just take those numbers as they are. So we've got -4 as it is, and on the other part, -3. So here the order is not important, to say you started with x minus 4 or you started with x minus 3 into x minus 4. The order here is not important. You can start with any part that you want. Either you're going to start with this or you're going to start with x minus 3. It's just one and the same thing, as long these 2 brackets are the ones that are shown or the ones that you have on your final answer. It means we are having the same answer on that part, all right? So the order of the brackets does not even matter, to say which order am I going to take or which order am I going to use. All right, so these are the questions that you're going to work with. So we're going to have more questions actually. We are going to have more questions to work with. But what I just want you to do in your revisions is to just revise as much as we can, because like I said, we are going to come back again with more questions to work on. And sometimes they might just give us questions as a confusion to us. Like for an example, we are given, let's say 6a squared plus 24a, 6a squared plus 24a. Then we have got minus 30. Let us have it as minus 30 like that. So they can give us questions whereby the coefficient of a is not 1. Remember here I said the a that we have here is supposed to be what? It's supposed to be a 1. So it's not like we are having a different expression. This one is just a question to confuse us. Why am I saying so? All right, if you consider this, I want you to take this expression. This is 6a squared plus 24a minus 30 like that. You can see that 6 is common throughout here. 6 is the highest common factor on these numbers. Remember the golden rule? If there is a common factor throughout, you have to factor out that highest common factor. So that means here I've got 6, I've got 6, I also have a 6 in these numbers. So I'm going to factor out the highest common factor, which is 6. The moment I do that, I'm going to have 6 divided by 6, which is going to be 1. So I'm going to be left with a squared. 24 divided by 6, which is going to give us 4. So that's 4a. Negative 30 divided by 6, which is negative 5. So as we can see, we have factorized 6, which is the highest common factor between the three terms that we have of the trinomial part. So at the end, we are now back to the normal expression that we are used to, because if we check here, the coefficient of a squared is a 1. So we are back again to that idea of having two brackets in this case, because this part that we are having at the end, we are used to this. So we are going to factorize this part. As you can see, the coefficient, we are back that it's a 1. So I'm going to just have two brackets, indicate a in the other bracket, a in the other bracket. Then what do I say? Said you're going to focus with the coefficient, I mean with the constant, the factors of the constant, but these factors should add up to the coefficient of a, which is the middle term, the one that carries the exponent of 1. So meaning to say, what are the two numbers that you multiply? Those two numbers, they give you a negative 5, but the two numbers should add up to a positive 4. So take note, the two numbers, they must give you a negative 5 as a product. So we need factors in this case of negative 5. All right, the two numbers that we think about having a 5, it's actually 5 and 1. But because it must be a negative 5, it means one of these numbers must be negative. So it's either I'm going to have this as negative 5, or I'm going to have this as 5 and negative 1. Because the product here is a negative number, which are the factors of negative 5. It means in order for you to have negative 5, between the two numbers that you have, one of the two numbers has to be a negative, because you are multiplying these numbers. So if you multiply, one of the numbers has to be a negative in order for you to get a negative at the end. But we are saying if we add them, they must add up to positive 4. So if I add here, which part is going to give me a positive 4? That is the question, all right? So on your calculator, you can just add the two terms or the two numbers that you are given here, which is the first one, it's negative 5 plus 1 in this case. This gives us a negative 4, not a positive 4. We need a positive 4, not a negative 4. So we're going to use 5 and negative 1, all right? 5 plus negative 1 like this, it gives us a positive 4, which is the same as the positive 4 that we are seeing here. So meaning to say, from these two numbers, 5 and negative 1, if I add these two numbers, I obtain a positive 4, which is the same as this one. So these are the two numbers that I'm going to write in my bracket. I'm having 5 and minus 1, 5 being a positive and 1 being a negative. So that means at the end, I've managed to factorize this in simplest form. So these are the typical questions that you are going to have. So let us just try to revise as much questions as we can from our past exam papers and also our textbooks. We shall have more questions working with the coefficient of a, the coefficient of x squared, which is our a, not equal to 1. But here we wanted a condition whereby at the end, we are going to have a 1. This is a direct factorization that you're supposed to know and to work with as much questions as you can in your syllabus.